Welcome to Matele Broadcasting Corporation. Today, I bring you a very interesting topic with Dr. Ndlovu and Mr. Maplang. We will be talking about the Ndebele kingship, the monarchy. We know what has been happening recently. Everyone has been talking about the Ndebele monarch, the Ndebele kingship. So we have heard comments from different sectors of the society and from different individuals, private and public individuals. We will ask Dr. Ndlovu to start. He will analyze the letter which has been written by Mr. Garwa, who is the Minister of Public Works. I hope we will learn a lot about what are the implications of the letter. What does it really mean to the people of Matabele land and to the country as a whole? What are the implications of such communication? I welcome you both on Matabele Broadcasting Corporation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nkala, for having us.
Thank you. Dr. Ndlovu.
Thank you very much, Babu Nkala. Thank you very much for this opportunity once more to be part of this discussion. A very interesting discussion, as we have already said, about a very topical issue at the same time. Yes, thank you very much for that opportunity.
Yeah, Dr. Ndlovu, as I said, I will give you a free rein. You will take it wherever you want to take it. Then after that, we will briefly engage you. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much for that opportunity,
okay.
Mr. Nkala. Thank you. Right, first and foremost, we have a letter here purported to be from the minister. This is a letter that, is crafted in very, I would say, the kind of language that is not very friendly. It is a kind of language which, right from the beginning, says the Minister of Local Government and Public Works has learned with shock and utter disgust of a meeting. Now it's talking to the mayor of Bulawayo, Councillor David Coltart. And it is actually, if you can just look at the words themselves right from the start, the minister has learned with shock, right, and with utter disgust. Now you are looking at a minister of government who is not seeking maybe a clarification from the councillor, that is from the mayor, regarding maybe why he hosted a certain individual who had walked into his office and so on. So the minister is already disgusted without having had to ask for an explanation or seek clarification or whatever. And you see, when somebody uses words like disgust, you get the impression that he is offended in a personal capacity. You see, but you don't expect that of a minister of government, because he can't take offense in a personal capacity. He should only be seeking clarification and, where necessary, ask the mayor to explain himself. If there are any laws that the mayor has violated, then the minister would seek audience with the mayor in respect of those alleged violations of the law, citing specific provisions in the law and getting to hear the mayor's side regarding whatever those provisions might be, which have allegedly been violated or infringed or breached by the mayor. So right from the word go, you get the impression that the minister is offended in a personal capacity with utter disgust of a meeting held in your capacity as the mayor of Bulawayo with a pseudo, right? Bulelani, Inkosi Bulelani is already being labeled as a pseudo king, Bulelani. So now, very interesting, because the word pseudo means a pretender. It means somebody who is making false claims regarding an authority that he does not hold. You see, this is very interesting, particularly when it comes from Zimbabwe as an establishment. Because as you read further, the letter goes on to cite the absence of a legal basis for, the observance of the powers of a king or the authority of a king in a country called Zimbabwe. So now he cites the constitution, particularly as he refers to section 283, which, according to the minister, he says, for the avoidance of doubt, the Zimbabwe constitution does not have a provision for kingship. Hence, his claim is baseless, unfounded, and a nullity. Section 283A of the Constitution of Zimbabwe Amendment Act 20 of 2013, read with Section 3.1 of the Traditional Leaders Act, provides that the appointment removal. So he's now talking about the appointment and removal of traditional leaders. But he then says that there is no provision for the king. Now, so much about that background. I want us to contextualize this discussion this way. First and foremost, the minister refers to the constitution, and then he seems to claim that any institution which is absent in the constitution is therefore a nullity and non-existent. Number one, this is a constitution that was drawn in 2013, and as a successor to the 1979 constitution that was drawn at the Lancaster House. Now, the 1979 constitution of Lancaster House, as we know it, was purportedly a constitution to reverse colonization which had happened in the territory called Zimbabwe today. And so, because the 1979 constitution was an independence constitution, so to speak, it did not have a provision for the king. And even the 2013 constitution does not have a provision for the king, though it is arguable that as a traditional leader, the king is provided for by the same section 283 that the minister claims is not exactly providing for the appointment or recognition of a king. But be that as it may, in terms of his argument, one will always want to ask this first question, and I believe this is very primary. The land called Zimbabwe, as we know it today, was colonized in two phases. First was the colonization of Mashonaland, which took place effectively on the 12th to 13th September 1890, when the pioneer column marched from South Africa and established itself there in what then was called Salisbury, where they hoisted their Union Jack there at Africa Unity Square, which then was later called, rather earlier called the Cecil Square. So that's where they hoisted the Union Jack there on the 13th of September, 1890. And that was going to be more than 3 years before the British attacked the Ndebele king, that is the Ndebele state led by Inkosi Bengula, who was then ousted after a very bitter and a fierce fight. We know of the battles of Lalapansi, Mbembesi, Katati, Pupu. We all know all that. All those battles have been well chronicled in history. Now, the interesting thing is this. When Inkosi Lobengula was eventually overthrown, and then he disappeared, Epupu, in 1894, precisely in January, it effectively marked the end of the Ndebele sovereignty, and it marked the end of the Ndebele monarchy and kingship. So interestingly then, that was the last event marking the British total control of the place, then Mashonaland and Matabeleland. Now, power was effectively seized from a king, particularly in Matabeleland. Power was seized from Ndebele king. So because power was seized from the Ndebele king, it effectively means that colonization, in order for it to take effect, only became possible when a king was overthrown. Now, if a king was overthrown, and later in the 1950s, 1960s to 1970s, a bitter war was fought to reverse the gains of colonization. That is what the colonizers had gained. It is actually hypocritical and paradoxical at the same time that because power was seized from a king, there was then decolonization purported in 1980, but it did not recognize the authority of a king. So you can imagine somebody takes power from a king, or somebody takes something from someone which happens to be their property, and then they claim to restore that to you, but they do not restore the title and the office that had been overthrown by the thief, by the colonialist. So what you then find is that, you see, there is something hypocritical with the Zimbabwean system, in the sense that the 1979 constitution does not recognize the king. And the 2013 constitution also remains mum and silent on that matter. Now, this is very interesting, because if really the war of the 1960s and 1970s was all about decolonization, why then was there no restoration of the king, since power was effectively seized by the British from a king? So, well, people in Mashonaland may argue that King Lobengula was not their king. They are granted the benefit of the argument. He probably was not their king. But how about that section of the country and of the population who were stripped of a king? So when now they are said to be independent, unless that independence is empty, because you can't claim to have given me independence, but refuse me the right to recognize an institution that I was dispossessed of by the same colonial system that you claim to have removed. Honestly, if there is no worse of hypocrisy than that, then one wonders what would represent hypocrisy. But in any case, talking about this issue of the constitution, this is one question that I often ask. Does the constitution of Zimbabwe, for instance, represent the values of the people of Zimbabwe, or it is purporting to be a source of values for the people of Zimbabwe? Mark that, because I want to show a distinction between the two items that I've mentioned. Now, if the constitution is a record of the values of the people of Zimbabwe, which is supposed to be, then it should record within itself that there is a section of the population of Zimbabwe, if not the whole country, at least a population, a section of it, which has its culture based on the system of a king. Because you must capture the values of the people and then incorporate them into the constitution. If the constitution is a record of the values of the people, so then it is a big question to say, why did the 1979 constitution not capture that? Somebody might say it was a haphazard and a hurried process at Lancaster House because people wanted to stop the war. Fair and fine. Let's grant that the benefit of the argument. They say, how about in 2013, which was about 33 years later, if I'm not mistaken? So why was the 2013, why did the 2013 constitution not factor in, this value, which is an important value for a certain section of the Zimbabwean constitution? Because you know that the developed people's life revolve around the constitution. But again, it comes to this whole idea of turning Zimbabwe into a monolithic kind of entity where even the constitution says we are a unitary state. So it seeks to silence every other voice which it demands an institution not popular with those who are in the corridors of power. If that then is the case, it is the very foundation of genocide. It is the very foundation of Kukurahundi, because genocide and Kukurahundi are premised on eliminating and erasing anything that contradicts the establishment. So you think of Kukurahundi not as a period in the history of Zimbabwe, but as a system and an ideology which seeks to erase anything that does not conform to what those in power believe to be the most appropriate and suitable system. But again, let me go back and say, I said earlier that there is a constitution as a record of the values of the people, and then there's the constitution as the source of the values of the people. Now, if the constitution is seen as a source, it basically means people come into the constitution without any values of their own. So they must now look into the constitution and understand what the constitution says, so that they can then model and frame their lives around what the constitution says. But that would be very problematic in itself, because then it raises the question to say, so if the constitution is the source of values, where did it obtain those values except it got them from the people? Or was the constitution drawn without consultation with the people that it purports to represent? Those then become the questions. And again, that then takes us to what has been is perceived in legal circles as, the distinction between positive law and normative law. Now, what is positive law? Positive law is actually an approach to the law which looks at what is written in the constitution, in the statutes, and what is generally regarded as law, according as you will find it in the sources of law within any jurisdiction. So positive law, for instance, would say, if somebody says it is an offense to steal your neighbor's property. So, in other words, somebody who has taken another person's property without permission is a thief, and that person must be arrested, prosecuted, and convicted, and so on. So that's what positive law says. We are looking at the law as it is written in the books. Whether it makes sense, it doesn't make sense, you will have to follow it because it is written in the books. So the minister seems to reason from the premise that because there is no provision for the king in the constitution, therefore it is illegal for any community of people within Zimbabwe to observe a king in their community. That's what positive law says. But normative law, on the other hand, look at the aspirations and the wishes of the people. And it would say, yes, fair and fine, positive law may not recognize the office of a king, but we have a section in our community which looks towards a king as their living practice, as their cultural practice. So normative law would then talk of including that missing element of a king in the constitution. So in other words, the constitution must be drawn to reflect the values of the people. In other words, if the constitution is drawn from the community itself, it means that the 2013 constitution did not, the process of making that constitution did not consult widely. Because surely I remember during that time, efforts for the restoration of the Ndebele kingship had already started. They were underway. Why was it not noted that the constitution, that the people of Matabeleland were clamoring for the restoration of their king? Why did that constitution not include that? Because surely, knowing fully well that these people were dispossessed of a king, they were dispossessed of sovereignty. Therefore, any constitution that is homegrown should have taken into account that these people required a king, and therefore it should have made a provision. So normative, there should be provision for the king. If it is not already there, then it must be put in place. Because as I seek to round up, let's go back again to the distinction between what are called a constitution as a record of values and constitution as a source of values. You find that the constitution as a record of values aligns very well with the normative thinking, because it says when a constitution is drawn, whoever the consultants or the agents or the commissioners are, they go out to the villages, they go to every nook and cranny, and they engage everyone that they meet there. Then they find out what their value systems are, what their expectations are. Then they distill that into a comprehensive document, and then they share that with the rest of the people, so that at the end of the day, the constitution, enshrines the will, the expectations, and the dreams and the aspirations of the community. But if so, that would be the case if the normative and the normative approach is adopted, and we see the constitution as a record of values. But on the other hand, the positivist approach would align itself to the positivist would align itself to the idea that the constitution is a source of values. So there is supremacy of the constitution, notwithstanding how it came into being. As long as something is written in the constitution is law, anything that is absent from the constitution is not law. So that would be the reason. But maybe as my last point, let me raise the issue of Zimbabwe and the nation, whether Zimbabwe is a nation or it's a collection of individuals. You see, this national question has been raised by many people for a long time, but has still not been answered. You see, there is the idea of defining Zimbabwe as a nation, but only in terms of and along the lines of dominant culture, or the culture of the politically dominant and the numerically dominant. So that it is then assumed that the language of the numerically dominant group represents Zimbabweanness. The culture of the politically dominant and the numerically dominant group represents Zimbabweanness. So that at the end of the day, if you are perceived to be your minority, your culture and your value systems have no place in Zimbabwe. If you practice anything that contradicts what is accepted in the mainstream, then you are not Zimbabwean enough. So you get the impression that Zimbabwe is not permissive of diversity. It seeks to define everybody according to the values and the culture of a certain group. And that on its own creates problems, because even those people that you may perceive as a minority, surely one is only a minority in terms of comparison. I can take an example and say the Tonga speaking people there on the Zambezi Valley, when somebody says they are few, the next question is, they are fewer than who? Because among themselves and in their own community, they are a majority. You talk about the Nambia there by the Wange towards the Victoria Falls side there. And if you tell us that the Nambia people are a minority, the question is, who are you comparing them with? Because among themselves, they are a majority. So, you see, if we are going to model Zimbabwe on the idea that there is a majority and there are minorities, then we will have a serious problem. Because the groups that are perceived to be minorities in whatever sense, they are majority in their own villages. Remember, wherever you are, if you have certain values, certain culture, certain language, you are a majority in that context. Unless and until somebody else from another group comes and outnumbers you in your place, again, that creates problems. So Zimbabwe needs to morph into a nation. At the moment, it is not, according to my own assessment, it is a collection of ethnic groups, a collection of individuals, a collection of communities that do not share a common past, a common present, or a common destiny. They do not see themselves as belonging to the same entity and sharing the same dreams and aspirations. That explains why when one section of the population says we want to recognize a king, another section then rises up and uses legal instruments and legal institutions to bully that other group into submission. Because at the end of the day, Zimbabweanness is defined in monolithic terms, very exclusionary terms. If you do not belong to what is perceived as a minority, rather as a majority, then you are not Zimbabwean enough. And as I said earlier, that is the genocidist foundation of Zimbabweanness, where somebody has to be silenced, others have to be silenced, all other identities have got to conform to a formal definition as espoused by the majority group. I think for the time being, maybe I didn't dwell much on the latter, but I dwelt on other issues by the side.
No. That's fine. That's fine. That's fine. Maybe just to ask one question from what you have just raised. The Constitution of Zimbabwe has a provision for traditional leadership. However, it doesn't mention any king, but does it mention leadership such as headmen and chiefs?
Thank you very much, Mr. Nkala, for raising that very important point, because then you see the Constitution is broad. Remember, it is a very broad document. It only leaves, as you can see, according to that letter, the letter reads Section 283A of the Constitution side by side with the Section 3.1 and 2 of the Traditional Leaders Act. So you find that because the Constitution is a broad document, it talks generally about the traditional leaders. And then it leaves the definition of the finer details to the enabling legal instrument, which then would be the Traditional Leaders Act. Well, the Traditional Leaders Act will then go into detail in defining a headman, a chief, and so on and so forth. Yes, it does then make those provisions for those headmen, but certainly not making a provision for the king in that sense.
Okay. All right. Gentlemen, we welcome Ubaba Sosha. Baba Sosha, siyakwamukela.
Hayi, ngiyabonga ninjani baphathi bami sizwe sabethwakazi.
No, siyabonga. Thanks very much. Baba Maplanka, do you have a comment? Do you have a question on what Dr. Ndlovu has just shared with us?
Yeah, I do. I share Dr. Ndlovu's sentiments, actually, because I think, when I first read that letter, I thought it was a Photoshop. I could not believe, in all seriousness, that could be a letter that was issued by government. Because, okay, let's talk about these complexities involved. A letter can be done or written to communicate. I'm writing to you to communicate certain information. This letter, though, was not a letter to communicate information. It was a symbolic letter. And the symbolism behind it is because it was really designed to humiliate, to intimidate, and to delegitimize the king. That's why it was written. And you start to ask yourself, this concept of the king, why is it so frightening that there has to be a government-issued comms based on that letter? And the answer is a whole lot of nonsense, actually, because this whole constitution argument makes little sense. I'll give you an example, Babangara. If you and me decide to have a five-a-side team, right? Sikete City, Nkala wena ule speed, usum captain. Government has got no business interfering with how communities are organizing themselves and positioning each other in their organizations. Baskambele Pambi, the time would have come for us after we've dealt with the intricate bureaucracies of setting up our monarchy. The time would have come, and I believe efforts have been made to say, let's integrate our monarchy within the legal legislation of the country. That time is still coming. We still have to do it. But that doesn't mean that the government has to intervene at this point when we're still trying to organize ourselves. The time will come, we won't hide. We will come out openly and say, right, we've sorted ourselves out. Now we need to finish the process of restitution that Ubaba Ndlovu was talking about. That restitution is to restore pre-colonial norms in the operations of our country. Right? That time will come when we will make those demands, and we will demand that the constitution is altered. Not only about the king, by the way. There are so many things that are not decolonized in the constitution of Zimbabwe. The systems of governance, the rules that are in there, a lot of them are not Afrocentric. A lot of them are not in line with our traditional and cultural heritage. We need to remove all those things from that constitution and make a constitution that is African and for Africans. The time will come. Let us hambili pambili. Thank you.
Okay, no, thanks very much. Mr. Mpunzi, I know that you came a little bit late. The gentleman or Dr. Ndlovu had already started sharing with us what he had. But if you have had anything that you like to engage, that will be fine. But what I'm asking of you is, could you briefly respond to Christopher Mthwanga's video? What's your analysis of that communication from Christopher Mthwanga?
I think first of all, Mthwanga has been sent is speaking on behalf of ZANU-PF and the ruling government. These are essentially people fighting on the same front. Your Minister Karwe and Mthwakazi, they are essentially in the same trenches, fighting, using or weaponizing the constitution in an attempt to stifle the rise of our nation. So there is really nothing that is a surprise there. But one thing that I would like to respond specifically to what Mthwakazi is saying is just like as he says that he has got a lot of reserved anger. It's always personal, just like Dr. Ndlovu said there. A lot of reserved anger. Why should he be offended by the rise of a nation that has always been there all the time? We know that our power, our political power, our governance systems, and everything that represents who we are as people from Matabeleland and Mthwakazi at large, all tribes that perished fighting the British South Africa Company, those people fighting the pioneer calamity, all tribes, all their being and their culture was entrenched in their king at the time, Inkosi uLobengula. So to that unreserved anger that I'm talking about, since Mthwakazi is saying he's got a lot of reserved anger. Well, we do have a lot of reserved anger for the likes of Mthwakazi, the likes of Shona political elites that are essentially weaponizing the constitution against the Mthwakazi kingdom. Unrepentant Kukraundis that are seeking to rely on the trauma that has been effected against our people and seeking to actually poke the wounds of Kukraundi by intimidating us and putting out statements that have got sentiments and connotation of a tribal apartheid and bullying that are genocidal in nature. It is within the United States human rights tenets that people should have their own self-determination, a way of living their culture and so forth. It's enshrined. The Zimbabwean constitution, to me, which appears to say to be saving the current political elite who have always grouped themselves along tribal lines and seen people from Matabeleland as nothing else but people that are subject to the politics of the day that has been socially engineered by them. We refuse that. We as Mthwakazi people, we do not owe any political elite person, be it ZANU-PF, be it CCC or whatsoever. Our kingship, our kingdom is over and above politics. It remains apolitical. Our king has never went and supported a particular political party and downplayed another political party. But because they fear the rise of our kingship and our kingdom that is threatening the decades-old social engineering that has perpetuated the notion of Shona supremacy, and that we as people who are non-Shonas are nothing else but subjects of the ruling Shona elite, and were within the clause of tribal political subjugation. We reject that with all the utter contempt it deserves. We will never allow political instruments of oppression to have a say in our kingdom. A king is a kingdom, and the constitution does not appoint a kingdom. Inkosi iyazalwa. The kingdom that belongs to a king is the one that acknowledges the king, not a Mthwakazi from ZANU-PF. not a Gara from ZANU-PF who does not have any royal blood whatsoever. We cannot have those individuals acting in their capacity as ZANU-PF representatives or government representatives tell us what to do. And our king cannot be reduced to a foreigner. If our king is being reduced to a foreigner, this actually cements the notion that we are viewed as foreigners by the government of the day. Anyone who's non-Shona, who is from Mthwakazi, and generally anyone who has been targeted by Gukuraundism, tribal oppression, tribal apartheid, systematic subjugation in all spheres of life, those people have always been sidelined, and we do not have to feel that Matabeleland is another region of Zimbabwe. It is the government of the day that failed to build a harmonic unitary state that embraces all cultures. Instead, it turned and committed mass murder and genocide and entrenched a hegemonic system of tribal supremacism that is nothing short of the Nazism that you have seen with Hitler and so forth, where a certain part of the population believe that they are the rightful owners of the land, and everyone else has to kowtow and fall in line to them and plead for mercy in order to exist. That is being entrenched by a tribal government that was created by Mugabe, perpetuated by those that came after him, and was saying to Mthwanga and company, Mashonaland and Matabeleland were never one country. And that has to be understood. Our king represents the bloodshed of our forefathers that died fighting the so-called pioneer column. They fought for this land that we call our own. The so-called Chimurenga that they are talking about did not involve any Shona. Our king was at the forefront fighting colonialism, where else the so-called quasi-Shona majority ran away. So now, how can we have our kingship that is amongst the few kings in SADC, actually in Southern Africa, that resisted colonialism to be reduced into the politics of ZANUism, Shona supremacism, and anything that is wicked and has got nothing to do with Pan-Africanism. It is with utter disgust that we see people that claim to have fought against colonialism use the very same colonial instruments in an attempt to subdue the rise of a kingdom that has always been there. Without this so-called kingdom where Bulelani's bloodline comes from, there would have never been no resistance against colonialism. The fact that those that call themselves the majority, they've got no pride, they've got no heritage of fighting and resisting the colonialism, or even fighting against the white men when it came to those lands. They had no king or a nation or a state to fight for. Does not mean we should be reduced to their standard. Statehood and nationhood we have always known. That was created by our king. And we seek to revive and preserve that. And there is no amount of political bigotry, skullduggery, or any other ethnocentric wickedness that will ever stop us from retaining our kingship and essentially reclaiming who we are. Our culture as a people will never be swallowed by politics of survival, where a dinosaur of a political party is ran out of steam and is seeking to use tribalism, ethnocentric tricks to remain in power. That is beneath us as a people. We've got to respect were people who are cultured and will never be reduced to a Mthwanga who has got credentials of colonial struggle that are questionable. We do not want to go further than that, but they must respect us.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much.
They must respect us.
Yeah, let me give Ubaba Maplanka just an opportunity to engage with your views, with your thought. Baba Maplanka, if you have any comment, any question that you
I feel your energy, Robin Boons. My concern about your sentiments are we've got to be so careful to not play into this game that ZANU-PF has created, the game of division. Intrinsically, I think I am a Pan-Africanist. And as a Pan-Africanist, it's within the remit of my beliefs that we should have a United States of Africa. The unity of Africa has to begin at cellular level, at unit level, because the divisions between tribes, when ZANU-PF do things that incite us to express the kind of rhetoric that further divides the people of Zimbabwe, there's only one winner from that game, and that winner is ZANU-PF. I'm intentional in how I engage when it comes to these particular issues. So if we believe that we should be united as Africans, we must be cognizant that if we go back enough in time, right, before colonization, and we step even further in time, before our different migrations in Africa, and we take even further steps back in time, at some point, as Africans, we really and truly are at a biological, genealogical level, we are really a one people. These superficial divisions, and I call them superficial because they are man-made constructs to say, at some point, one group of people said, you know what, we're going to call ourselves the Sutu. At some point, they said, you know what, we're going to call ourselves the Ndwandwe. So these are man-made constructs, but at biological level, we're all really a singular people. We need to really move away from feeding the beast that ZANU created, because what they did was intentional. They created a division that they knew is going to last perpetually. This trick of dividing people is old, used in other, by other colonial systems that predate the Zimbabwean one. I'm talking about in the Roman times. You divide people, they can never unite and be progressive in how they operate and think. Now, that doesn't mean that we should ignore the atrocities that were committed in Zimbabwe. It doesn't mean that as a people, we stop demanding that there should be some corrective measures that are made in regards to what happened to us or what continues to happen, because Kukuraundi was just a singular phase of a much larger plan. Yeah, and that plan is still in effect to today. The grand plan, we all know that grand plan. It's now common knowledge that it exists. So marginalization is the engine that keeps driving and feeding this beast. But just like racism, for us to win the fight over racism, part of the oppressive races had to be involved in that. So even in this fight against marginalization and subjugation, we are going to need people from all tribes, including and especially Shona people, to stand up and say, not in my name. So this adversarial spirit between us and Shona people has to evaporate. It has to go. We really are truly a singular people. That's what I believe. And that's my response to Obama.
Okay, no, thanks very much, Baba Maplanka. Dr. Ndlovu, do you have anything to add on what Babu Socha has said or Babu Maplanka has just said?
This is a very, thank you very much, Babangala. To Babu Sosha and Babu Maplanka, this is a very interesting engagement to the extent that it maybe represents the two versions of Matebelele, or the two versions of Mthwakazi as a nation, whereby you see there's a section that is rolling up the sleeves, ready to roll with the punches. And then we have a moderate section who says, we are one people, let's not stoop down to law and be drawn into this fray that has been created by an abusive system of government. Well, it is not for me to decide which one is better than the other. Suffice it to say that we have them. And sometimes, you see, as I fully agree with Mr. Maplanka, that we biologically stem from one root. There's the issue that this social contract or this human construct called tribe or ethnic group has actually messed people up to the extent that we have one section that is enjoying the juice, and you've got another section edla ingqeqe zomlomo. So khona lokho kuvele nje kudala ukuthi abantu bagcine sebedonsana ngamawashi ngowashwa amazulu, ngoba phela angikwazi ukuhlezi ngilambile kodwa wena ube umofuza nezingane zakho emzini wakho. So khona lokho you see, if these social contracts were just about fences of name and so on, they wouldn't really raise many problems. But because they go hand in hand with the allocation of resources and the survival, daily survival, then it becomes very polarized thing in itself. And whilst we are hopeful that one day it will get resolved, maybe the concern is that it is taking too long, because the gap between one group and the other group continues to grow by day. But well, thank you very much. I was going to say regarding what Mr. Sosha was saying, especially regarding Mr. Mthwangwa. Sometimes when I'm by myself and I try to reflect, I notice that this kingship represents something that Mthwangwa and his friends have never heard. It represents something that they wish they had, but they never had an opportunity to have. Because you see, this kingship speaks, it invokes memories of a kingdom. It defines who the Mthwakazi people are. It gives them a compass to look with which to get back to the original direction that their forefathers have always had. So at the end of the day, when you hear the runs by Mthwangwa and the Garoes and all these other people, it is indicative of the discomfort that inheres inside of them as they imagine that people perceived to be lesser beings than who they are seem to have this rich heritage which they just can't even emulate. They can't even buy it with money. So for that reason, it causes them then to become very hostile, very defensive. And I was listening to some voice note, I can't remember who had made it just this afternoon. And this person was saying the kingship sends shivers through the spines of people such as Mthwangwa, because if you look at it very closely, the kingship represents the only institution that cannot be infiltrated. Because for you to belong to that institution, you will have to show your history, your allegiance, and everything else. And so, because the system has always been so bent on infiltrating every institution and every organization in Matabeleland as well as in every in Zimbabwe, it then raises concerns that there is this institution which they will not be able to infiltrate by whatever means. So it raises that discomfort because they then have to try and nip it in the bud and ensure that it does not grow. Because if it grows, then they will not be able to infiltrate it and they will not be able to control it. And it could prove to them more formidable to control than any other institution, because by its nature, it is very exclusionary. It is preserved only for a select who know themselves. So what about those coming from the outgroup who also want to come and influence and infiltrate and influence? They will not be able to come in. So Mthwakazi and his friends are speaking from fear, because remember, we are talking about people who are guilty, who have unleashed a genocide, and they are always worried that if Matabeleland rises, it's going to revenge the genocide attacks. Just like I think Joshua Nkomo once said that a person who oppresses another is more oppressed than the victim. Because if I have to sit down on you, Mr. Nkala and Mr. Maplanka and Mr. Sosha, and try to oppress you, it means I must always sit on that same position and fix you right to the floor. Because the moment I leave you to move away and get myself a drink or a cup of water, you will then break free and be able to fight me. So those are some of the dynamics that we have. They are so oppressed in their obsession with oppressing, because they can't let go, lest in that moment when they look away, you will stand up and revenge. So that's my comment so far. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Babandov. Mr. Socha, I will come to you, but for now, allow me to go to Maplanka. Mr. Maplanka, we have seen two articles writing about the monarchy.
Yeah.
One of them, it said, King Bulelani Lopengula, the crown is his by blood, not permission. And the latest one, it says, restoring the throne. Why our monarchy still matters. I will take you through a number of questions, but now let me start with this one, because I want you to go back a little bit in terms of our history, so that you give the context to a number of things that you might want to share.
Right.
There has been a lot of misinformation about King Mthwakazi's journey from KwaZulu.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through the actual historical context of the migration and what prompted it?
So you see, this is what I call the first lie. This first lie is this propaganda that was used to create a narrative of King Mthwakazi being some sort of renegade. In reality, there's nothing that could be further from the truth. And I'll take you through some points that actually prove this theory. Firstly, you'll be aware that King Shaka himself had a problem with Zwide, with the Ndwandes. And because Mthwakazi had intricate knowledge, having lived there for some time, he actually helped King Shaka to overcome that particular kingdom. And Shaka was forever indebted to King Mthwakazi for that win. Now they created this propaganda that says King Mthwakazi refused to hand back cattle, and when Shaka demanded them back, then King Mthwakazi fled with his people. Guys, in fact, sometimes I even wonder how we even allowed such a nonsensical narrative to permeate through time. Because anyone with reasoning capacity will know that you cannot run with an entire nation. It's impossible. You cannot run with old elderly women, with elderly men, with people who are weak and vulnerable. You cannot run with all your belongings. It is virtually impossible. It is impossible to run. It is impossible to defend. If King Shaka had, as they say, tried to pursue Mzilikazi, King Mzilikazi would not have been able to protect the cattle that they were with, the livestock, the elderly people, the women and children. It is an impossible notion. So that's the first lie that we need to change. King Mzilikazi and King Shaka probably, because they were very intelligent and military guys, it looked around them and said, look, as the saying says, angeke kube lekuzini ezimbili esibayeni esisodwa. Lenkunzi ezimbili. So what is the solution to this? Okay, fine. I'm going to leave. I'll take my people, I'll make my way. And they shook hands. They probably even had a celebratory dinner before Mzilikazi parted ways. That's more realistic narrative of what actually happened. And he probably made his way, and some history there is preserved orally about his journey coming into Zimbabwe. And the lie that was told was continued about what actually happened when he got to modern day Zimbabwe. You speak to, I was saying earlier on that the instruments of division never rest. They work tirelessly to divide us tribally. If you speak to a lot of people who come from the Shona tribes, they will always, without doubt, without failure, tell you that King Mzilikazi arrived in Zimbabwe in some sort of bloodbath, killing people, and another lie. I'll tell you, we live on the south coast near Hastings. If you go to 1066 grounds where the battles that were fought by historical kings, archaeologically, if you dig there, you will find the bones of those people. In fact, some of them have been dug up, and memorial places have been put up. Where are the bones of all these people that King Mzilikazi is meant to have ravaged and savaged? Did he kill those people and eat the bones? They don't exist. It's another lie. King Mzilikazi was never a marauder. He was a person who believed in building a kingdom by alliances and negotiation. And the Shona people themselves were not stupid. They didn't have any armies. And they could tell that these guys are battle hardened. They were never going to try and fight King Mzilikazi. They were never that stupid. They, maybe the worst thing that could be said about King Mzilikazi, those guys could have agreed to joining the kingdom under coercion. That's the worst thing you could say. This narrative of killing millions of people is just simply a lie. Because I can tell you something for nothing. If King Mzilikazi had done that, and the battle areas where these people are meant to have been killed were known, we would have government-funded humongous shrines in those places, commemorating this murderous Ndebele king that they try and perpetuate. It simply is, exactly as I say, a pathetic lie that we should never ever be believed, and we should correct that narrative henceforth.
Okay, no, thanks very much. Thanks very much. Yeah, I also remember that Mzilikazi's mother even died in Pretoria, Transvaal, meaning that Mzilikazi left with the children, with wives, with grandmothers, all those kind of things. Yeah. So no, I do understand and agree to what you are saying. You know, Mzilikazi, when he got to Zimbabwe, he had a way of building the nation or building the state. So that process of state building, how
did it come about?
how did it come about, and how can we utilize it in the present day Zimbabwe?
Right. So if you talk to Amakela, really, they'll tell you the true stories. I mean, our history is passed down not in written context but in song. If you know that song, which says, "Kudala kwakunganje, kwakubusa umambo lomzilikazi." So what actually happened? The true story is they negotiated the alliance because number one, King Zilikazi knew for a fact that the people who lived in these lands knew the lands better than he could ever know those lands. So he needed them as much as anything else. And he also knew that in their societies and communities and tribes, they knew each other. They were the best advisors for him on each other. Right? So that is why you find some statements that have since been bastardized when they say about Ubenkos. Because actually one of the rules and regulations was if you killed these people that were called Abantu Benkos, now Abantu Patishona Benkos, that's just a bastardization of the King's Council, actually. Because he took their elders, their community leaders, and incorporated them into his council. They were the best advisors, even at a domestic level. But then I'm telling you, and so from the day one, he could have a peaceful, cohesive society. Now, what we know is that there was an agreement that was reached, Nomamba, where Mzilikazi was a military leader and the indigenous people there, a leader was going to become the religious leader. That's why you find ukuthi indawo ezinjengenjelele are revered even by the Ndebele people. Because he understood completely that in Daole, spiritually, Ibajwe, ngama holy shrine ezindawo zangikhona wasihlonipha wanikela futhi lokunikela the songs are there. As I say, our oral tradition is passed through music about that process where wanikela ngezinkomo, the number is even said. So it was a very peaceful transition into the kingdom. How can you build a kingdom by killing people? Because you have no people left. He was building a kingdom in a peaceful, negotiated process. He was a far better leader than Putin, than Trump, than all these leaders we have today that believe that they can further their own interest only through the barrel of a gun by murder.
Then why do you think there's been a deliberate distortion of the Ndebele origin story in school curricula and state media?
Yeah, it's political, if I have to be honest with you, because we talked about decolonization. What the Zanu government did is they looked through colonization and decided that they were going to keep some of those instruments of subjugation for their own use. One of those instruments was the instrument of propaganda. So, and they were very effective in how they carried it out. So even the process of Kuguraundi was meant to be a foundation to create this perpetual division within the population of our country. So you find that when they distort the Ndebele story, it's really to keep the Shona people angry. That's what it's about. It's to keep the Shona people distrusting of any Ndebele leaders. If you look since independence, actually, or even since the liberation struggles, people like Joshua Nkomo, there is no comparison in leadership between him and Mugabe. But if you look back in the archives, you will find people at that time had been conditioned to believe that he was somebody that really hated them, that was ready to kill them, that was ready to sell out the country. Something that was obviously a ridiculous propagandist lie. So division is the reason why they perpetuate these lies to keep us divided.
Okay. Then why do you think the Zim state refuses to recognize the monarchy despite recognizing other traditional leaders such as the headmen and chiefs?
It's all down to power, because the nature of autocracy is that you have absolute control. The chiefs are a story for another day. The chiefs also are a problem when it comes to our traditional and cultural setup, because the reality is the only reason why they're recognized is because they are completely and utterly under the control of those at the top of the ladder. If they were not, if they were truly representative of the people, they wouldn't be recognized. So here's the question now we have to ask ourselves: are they really our chiefs? That's the question we have to ask ourselves. Are they ours? Are they our chiefs? Do they act in a way that shows that they are representative of our people, our interests, our safety, our progress? If not, then we must ask those questions. And I don't blame them. I'm not out here to say that chiefs are bad people. We shouldn't recognize them. Actually, the co-option of chiefs into a system that is used to control our people was not done by ZANU-PF first. It was done by the colonialists first. They took control of those chiefs, and after that they passed them on to ZANU, who just perpetuated that control over them. But the time will come where the reckoning must happen, where we'll say, look, we're either going to have to go back to the drawing board and appoint people that are truly representative to be to stand in as our chiefs, because it's a real problem, this whole chief thing. They are not traditional leaders in my view.
Okay, that's an interesting view. How did the colonial conquest disrupt the spiritual and political continuity of the Ndebele throne? And what are the consequences today?
Because you've got to look at that, the king built a kingdom not on ethnic purity really, but he built a system that was from shared values. That's where the peace came from. You know, he united all the different tribes, the Vendas, the Sutu, the Kalanga, and even, believe it or not, the Shona. Some people don't realize that there are some Shona tribes that are Ndebele. If they were in the kingdom, they are actually Ndebele themselves. So that continuity of that kind of unity could never have been allowed to continue. That's why you see that not only did they plan the discontinuity of it at that particular time, they were thinking decades ahead. How can we make sure it never happens? That's why I believe they murdered the King Lopengula and concealed his grave. I'll give you an example of that. When people are driven by the respect and the adoration of a leader, it can be a good thing, but it can also be a bad thing. If you look at today's world, terrorists will listen to somebody who tells them to do the worst things in society, right? But they almost hold their leaders to with fanatical reverence. This is exactly why Osama bin Laden, you'll never find his grave. Because that would have been a point where they go and it would have turned into a shrine. When it's a shrine, it leads to other fanatical people who can continue that kind of thing. That very reason, that kind of thinking is why they hid where they buried our king. I know there's people, there's scholars that believe that they found the grave of King Lopengula. And if they have, I'm happy. You know, they can prove my theory wrong. But I believe that they can never allow the Ndebele tribes to have a one united leader. They can never allow that to happen.
Okay. All right. No, thanks very much. Baba Mpuns, you heard Mr. Maplanga's response to what you said, and you heard what Dr. Njov said. If you have anything to say, this is your opportunity, sir. But also, you can engage some of Mr. Maplanga's thoughts and views. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, sir. Yes, I'll start Maplangalana. I'll say I am a Pan-African myself. I'm Pan-Africanist. I understand the benefits of coming together. I see Africa a continent as a single unity that was segmented for the purposes of exploitation by the colonial masters of the day. However, my desire and my need to be Pan-Africanist does not trump the apparent oppression, tribal apartheid that is being faced by my people. I would love to fight for Pan-Africanism as I believe in it. But in order for my people to fully, just like as everyone else who are Mthwakazi people, in order for these people, Mthwakazi people, to fully realize the benefits of Pan-Africanism, the oppression has to go away, the ethno supremacy and tribal apartheid should stop. In my highlighting and exposing the decades-long subjugation, I'm trying to fight for Pan-Africanism, without which my people will never partake or come to the fore of anything called Pan-Africanism. If we're to say the current Zimbabwe country is coming into a Pan-African government, this will mean our people are not going to be represented. They're not going to represent themselves. In fact, they're having a group of tribes that were formulated by a certain professor in 1929 to be a tribal hegemony as a weapon of trying to social engineer a group of Africans in the then Rhodesia. So mine is to say we are on the same boat. I do not believe that my people, after suffering unrepentant genocide, should continue to go to the Pan-African forefront, being almost slaves or the equivalent of Palestinians in Israel, so that they can serve the greater good of Pan-Africanism. That does not sit right with me. Our people should have their own political autonomy. And what these Mthwangwa and they're saying, they're actually veering, because I'm in between succession and all other ways of political autonomy that people are saying. But my compass is being veered off towards total autonomy. When a minister like Garo speaks in the manner that they were speaking, that actually is not only disgusting, but it makes me realize that this politician comes from a community of people, and those people have got values and norms, and those norms inform what they generally accept as normal or permissible. A politician doesn't fall from the tree. we have seen mostly when you've been speaking about the rise of our king being told to go back to KZN. Those tendencies of Shona supremacism are only there to oppose our self-determination, culturally, so not even politically. So if there is a system that was created by the whites during colonialism to divide and conquer, and you've got a group of tribes that were created by the colonial masters that have assumed those vices of political oppression, and they're actively using those vices to continue to subjugate people from Matabeleland and people who are generally targeted by Kukrawundi. It is not, I believe it is not for anyone from Matabeleland to ignore those and say, yes, we are for Pan-Africanism. Let's not voice out, perhaps this will create further division. Mine is to say, this is an atrocity that has been taking place for more than 40 years. And we have to speak about it. Personally, I would rather not be celebrated by anyone who thinks I'm not Pan-African than neglect my people who have been suffering by a people that have adopted the evil vices of political wickedness, where they weaponize law and the constitution to subjugate a people. I would rather be known for fighting against oppression, and the oppressor is generally ZANU-PF, and the sympathizers and beneficiaries of that system, who are generally Shona people, not everyone. When I say generally, I mean generally called, but it's not always cloudy all the day. So obviously not every Shona. But when you find most Shona people, when you speak about your culture and pointing the oppression by the ZANU-PF Shona elites, when you see them being offended, it only tells me that they are beneficiaries of the system. They like the status quo to be continued. They do not feel any empathy whatsoever to our people. Then why should I not paint them with the same brush? These are the beneficiaries of Kukrawundi. That's why I did say some time ago that those people that have got that mindset that they are supreme, they are Shona, and everyone else should bow down to their political or social hegemony, is they might as well carry and wear lapels of the skulls of Kukrawundi people as medals and lapels on their shoulders.
Conclude.
That's what I want to say,
your point, you're a man who's got, I could listen to you all day. You've got very flowery language. And it's beautiful to listen to. But I also believe your points are correct. And I don't think that I differ with the sentiment. But I believe maybe because autonomy, politically, socially, we need it. And in the context of Pan-Africanism, maybe a United States of Africa means that the Mthwakazi state, the Shona state, the Zambian state could form a federation of states. But a state, we must at some point have that autonomy. Of course, at the moment, it's a difficult path because of, you mentioned social engineering, yeah? If you go to present-day Matabeleland, the social engineering that has happened there is that there's probably very little Mthwakazians left there. You know, they've done that intentionally to derail any hopes of this succession story that we have. But I take your point on board. The Pan-Africanism plan is a United States of Africa.
Okay. No, thanks very much. Dr. Ndlovu, Mr. Maplanka has shared his views when I was asking him some questions. I don't know whether you have anything to say.
Thank you very much, Babukala. Thank you very much, Babu Maplanka and Babu Socha. Well, when Mr. Maplanka was speaking particularly about the history of the Mthwakazi kingdom in transit from present-day KZN to Mthwakazi, where it is now geographically, I couldn't do much but just to listen and to marvel at some of these facts that have been kept hidden from us, and some of these distortive narratives that have always been peddled in our midst. You see, it is very clear that history particularly has been used and continues to be used as an instrument by whoever controls the narrative, to build a certain storyline and narrative that suits their agenda. Out of interest, may I tell you that I began my working career as a teacher of history, and I taught history for more than a decade, if I could say. And in one of those classes that we had at the Hillside Teachers College when I was still a student, a teacher there, we had this gentleman, Mr. Siba. I think he's somewhere at Luveve there, New Luveve. He's retired now. But one of the lessons and discussions that I remember us having was to do with the use of history as a discipline. And to be honest, when you look at Althusser as what you call this ideological state apparatus, that's Louis Althusser, you realize that it is all about using history as a discipline as part of the ideological state apparatus. So the kind of narrative that is peddled at a particular time, the historiography that is promoted at a particular time by the powers that be, is actually designed to shape the minds of the people in line with this social engineering that has always been the instrument of oppression and an instrument of governance, depending on how it is deployed. So at the end of the day, the question will always be what narrative or what approach to history is adopted at a particular time. So the imperialist obviously described Mzilikazi and the Ndebele as cattle rustlers, as raiders, as thieves, as fugitives of justice. You can imagine all those different descriptions, negative in their sense, negative superlatives, if one would call them that. And then, so that was the focus of the colonial historiography. Then, fast forward to 1980, there is the Zanuist historiography, again consolidating the idea of the Ndebele as cattle rustlers and as fugitives of justice and as foreigners. That's why even the king, Bulelani, is dubbed a foreigner. Now, this idea of, peddling the idea that the Ndebeles are foreigners, it's not accidental, but it is something that is by design. Recently, I participated in a certain community forum discussion where some of our own people have now bought into the story that the Ndebele are foreigners. I even say to them, it is not the Ndebele community that arrived in this place, but it is the leadership, the Nguni leadership that arrived. Because we need to distinguish, when somebody says the Ndebele came from Zululand, you even get the impression that all those Moyo people that we have in Machiavelli, they came. Even those people who answer to Kalanga names, you get the impression that even Inkosi or Induna Umasendo or Induna Umalaba, they came. But we know that historically that can't be correct. Because Induna Umasengu, Umkalanga, Induna Upashu, Umtonga. So how can you say that those people came? How could Inkosi Upashu have come from Zululand, when he is Tonga by origin and by language. But again, like I'm saying, these historiographies are adopted and accentuated in order to consolidate a certain worldview which favors the ideology of the establishment, and it justifies their hold onto power. Because after all, if Induna Masendo or Induna Upashu are from from KZN, then so they don't even have any rights to be claiming any legitimacy in those places where they are. So yeah, that's as far as the issue of the history is concerned. And then coming to Ubaba Umpunzi, again, I agree with him to a great extent, because as he was saying, we cannot march into Pan-Africanism with the notion that the Ndebele are foreigners, because surely they would not go in there with any power, but they are going in there already. Ndebele, or rather, Ndebele people, let me not shy away from that. They are portrayed along the same lines as colonialists. Because, when Mugabe was saying a secular is a secular, we will not be ruled by seculars. Many people failed to see beyond what he was saying. He was equating the whites as seculars and the Ndebele as seculars. So as far as he was concerned, there was no difference between a white secular or a Nguni secular. A secular is a secular. And that narrative continues to be peddled even by people like Energy Mtoti, people like Monica Mtswangwa. They have said it in not many hidden ways that the Ndebeles are secular. So where they talk about Mr. Coltart as a secular, and they talk about Bulelani as a secular, for them, Bulelani and the Coltart are both seculars, whether one is white, the other is black, but all are seculars. So at the end of the day, this whole story about Inkosi Bulelani being a foreigner, it's actually an undertone to say even the very people that owe allegiance to him, they are seculars together with him. And so where do they belong? It belongs somewhere between the Indian Ocean and the Drakensberg Mountains. That's how said it is.
Okay, no, thanks very much. I think now I will ask you one question. All of you will respond to one question. This is going to be our final question. What are the implications of restoring the monarchy? Is it just symbolic, or it has a deeper purpose? Let me start with you, Babanjov.
Well, there is a thesis that I have tried to share and promote in recent weeks, especially about this kingship. I said to some of the people that I was speaking to, that the purpose of the king is more important than the identity of that king. Without speculating too much, I think Mr. Blanca had said it at some point, that the concern is not so much about who the king is, but the concern is about what impact the recognition of this king will have. So it's all about power. Once you recognize Inkosi Bulelani and you allow people to rally behind him, then it is going to offset the balance of power within. We can gloss around with the issue and say this king is not political and so on. But what is politics anyway? It's a discussion for another day. But at the end of the day, when we have Inkosi Bulelani standing there and the people recognizing them, it unsettles those who are concerned with the distribution of power, because they know very well that even if it's ceremonial and symbolic, it still has political influence. Thank you.
No, thanks very much. Baba Mpunzi, same question to you.
Ngiyabonga Babungani. Yeah, the king essentially is a reminder to those that have been socially engineering Mthwakazi people into almost oblivion, for lack of a better way, that we are not conquered yet, that we still have capacity, and we still know who we are. And our kingship reminds them that you have always been a separate state from Mashonaland, and that statehood and nationhood of ours is what enabled us, our kingdom, to resist colonialism and have those battles that they call Chimurenga, but they never participated in them. So our revival of this kingdom is a stark reminder that this cooking of history books by them, that we are a weak and inferior people and a certain tribe that is a colonial construct, in reality is supreme to us, is nothing but a fallacy. Our kingdom is a stark reminder that we are not fully conquered yet, and we are resolute and to some extent self-determined, and we cannot become swallowed and become a hegemonic group under political duress and economic starvation by the Shona political elite. Ngiyabonga.
Siyabonga kakhulu Baba Mpunzi. Baba Maplank, same
Thank
question
you.
to you.
Yeah, I was just writing down a few pointers there. I think the impact of us having our king, it frightens the establishment, and I'll tell you why. If you look at the patterns in Zimbabwean politics, they have developed a binary political system where they are divided between them two parties, or the left and the right. And the difference at elections is always very minor when it comes to actual votes. So, hypothetically, if we have a king, what that means is the Mthwakazi people become united. That unity also means when it comes to our political choice, we are going to vote in a united way. What that means is that then Mthwakazi become the kingmakers of Zimbabwe. Because if Mthwakazi decided that we are voting with MTC or that side of politics, that side will definitely win. If Mthwakazi decided that we're going with the right side, the ZANU side, that side will also definitely win. They will never allow us to become kingmakers. But they don't understand something. That for us, having a king is not a political thing. It's deeply spiritual. Because the monarchy sort of anchors our beliefs, our culture, our traditions, our ancestral veneration in a way. And we need to have that identity of self again, because it's gone. It's been under attack since colonial times, post-colonial. I don't like to use the word post-colonial because we're still living in colonial times. We are definitely under a colony. So symbolically, it's very powerful, politically or culturally, and they'll never allow it to happen for both those reasons. Thank you.
Okay, no, thanks very, very much. Gentlemen, I would like to thank you for this exciting, informative, and illuminating discussion that we have just had. I hope that next time when I ask you to come and have a similar debate, you will oblige. For now, could I ask you to give us your closing remarks? Let me start with you, Baba Mpunzi. Your closing remarks, Baba.
Ngiyabonga Babunkala nani baphathi la kwi-panel. My closing remarks are as follows. These to be directed first at the person of Mutswangwa, and the likes of him, his age group, generally the architects of Kukraundi and so forth, is you political elders, so to speak, you are old and you are hoping to die unrepentant with your genocidal sins. My advice to you is repent and seek the Lord. Perhaps you can be washed by the blood of Jesus while you are still alive. Ours is to fight to the Lord God Almighty, to pray to him and ask for grace and strength to undo the damage that you seek to undo, where you seek to conquer a culture, a people, and create a Shona superstate and make everyone else under duress forget who they are for the purposes of consolidating political power. That is what is going to lead many dissenting voices join this successionist bandwagon. It is because of the doing of these ZANU-PF political elites. And it's time for them to retire and die in peace, and let the younger ones, perhaps, they'll be more sober-minded. Thank you, sir.
Okay, no, thanks very much. Dr. Ngo, your closing remarks, ba?
Thank you very much, Babunkala. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Babunkala. Thank you, Babu Maplanka, and thank you, Babu Mpunzi. It's been a very fruitful and enlightening discussion. I'm glad to have been part of it, and I look forward to more engagements along these lines. I must say that, our people, by our people, I mean our brothers and sisters, both in Mthwakazi and in Zimbabwe, deserve better than what is currently happening. There is need for the powers be in Zimbabwe, the powers that be, to realize that lies can never be a foundation for any progressive state. Any society built on lies shall never stand. It's high time they came to their senses to realize that you will not build a Zimbabwe by silencing one side or one portion of the country and trying to fabricate history to build anything out of lies. Because whatever has not happened has not happened, and what has happened in terms of history must be observed and respected. Thank you very much for the opportunity once more.
Oh, thanks very much, Dr. Ndlovu. Baba Maplanka, your closing remarks, ba?
Yeah, I was running out of battery. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Right. Thank you to my fellow panelists. It was an illuminating and very interesting discussion. I think we need to have these kind of discussions that are informative and educational to each other, because where information is controlled, we lose a lot of ourselves in that. And I guess to the viewers, I'd like to say, as we reflect on the past and we confront the present, one truth is becoming more and more clear all the time. A people without memory are a people without power. Ubaba Umguni was talking about how we need to regain some sort of control over our own destinies. The story of King Mthwakazi, King Lobengula, and now King Bulelani is not just history. It is a living, breathing testimony of resilience, of our identity, and of spiritual inheritance that belongs to us. The Ndebele monarchy is really, it's not a relic. They talk about it like it's something that belongs in the past. But actually, it's a symbol of who we are, who we were, and who we are going to be in the future. We need to be united. We need to be dignified. We need to be self-defined. We must reject in totality these colonial narratives that seek somehow to divide us and reduce our legacy to myths. They create these useless myths. Our unity will not be found in politics alone. I must mention that. Our culture, our truth, our courage are the things that we need to concentrate on. Because, our monarchy it didn't go away. It was taken away from us. It survived in exile. It survived in the bloodlines that run through King Bulelani to this day. And it also survived in memory. I did mention earlier, we have to talk to our elders, and follow that oral tradition. And now, as we have a glimpse of having our monarchy returning, can I just ask that we honor it, that we defend it, that we rally around our monarchy? Because when we restore our monarchy, we're not looking backwards at what happened in the past. We're anchoring our future, preparing for the future of the Ndebele nation. Vayete, Wenagasu.
Bayede. Okay, no, thanks very much, gentlemen. This is one of the most beautiful conversations that we have had. A people's identity, a people's values and aspirations are very important. And they should, can I say, in the Constitution. Because if you do not cater for people's values and aspirations and their identity in the Constitution, it means that you are nullifying a people's history. You are nullifying a people's future. This is what has been happening in Zimbabwe, and we hope that these kind of conversations, which are meaningful and respectful, will gain traction, and some people will start to see what should really happen. So I thank you very much. Ogankala uti kum.
Vayete.
Bayede. Vuka